Words can mislead.
They can.
If I go, ugh, you know where I'm at.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's visceral.
Yeah.
You feel it.
Yep. Caveman project management. Look out for my new book coming out fall of 2025.
Welcome to the Marketing Team of One podcast, where we have conversations about the issues one-person marketing teams face when trying to meet their goals with limited time and budgets. Now here's your hosts, Eric and Mike.
What's up, Eric? What are we crying about today?
Oh, man. Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm not really crying about anything specific to my week, but I did read a story recently, and that made me cry because it made me think of like things that I went through as a youngster growing up in this crazy business. I don't really work with a lot of these types of clients, and most of them that I've experienced have been in-house. So I don't have a lot of experience working with those, but I've worked next to people that work with some of these people. And the problem was, the story kind of went like this. There was a marketing manager who met with their boss. Their boss had some hopes and dreams for this big, gigantic, successful marketing program. And things were not perfectly clarified along the way as far as what are the goals and what's the timeline. And so this marketer went in full steam ahead, kicking butt, doing whatever that person could do to succeed and align with maybe goals that were kind of roughly outlined, but not really very clarified when the project began. 2 months in, boss person wanders in and says, I got a great idea. Okay, let's scrap that because it's not really going anywhere. It's not really succeeding. I don't see any traction, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, because of the disconnect from that leader, didn't realize that, didn't really look into the fact that this probably could have been a successful marketing campaign, and this person had put their heart and soul into this project for the rug to be basically ripped out from under them. So that brought me to tears. Mike.
To tears.
I was weeping.
Crying.
I mean, I was like NPR story, driveway weeping, like lip quivering.
Just
because it's just too many, like, you work so hard on that project and you're making progress, and you had to get copy, and you had to get photography, and you had to get that video and Instagram. And
see, I would go directly to rage. Like I don't know if I'd cry in that case, like to put all that work into something and then just wait, what? Yeah. We're doing something else now?
Yeah.
Maybe put in the boss's shoe. What is the boss thinking there? Like, where are they coming from?
Yeah. Bosses get shiny object syndrome a little bit. And when they're not as engaged or they aren't as clear maybe with their goals, I think as a marketer, solo marketers especially, are left to kind of make up some of the story themselves, make up what is success. Hopefully it resonates with what the boss thinks is success.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes it's not, because everybody's slightly different. And unless you do a good job of clarifying what's the goal, what's the budget, what's the time frame? Because really, in my experience and yours too, I mean, we've both done a lot of marketing campaigns throughout many, many years. And what I think is interesting is we've done small ones and we've worked on big, I would quasi say national. I used to do a lot of cereal box design.
Yeah.
And I look at that as kind of national marketing because, there's a lot of mechanics and advertising in play that make those very successful. They're short, they're expensive, and they have reasonable success.
Yeah. Short, like only 2 inches high, or time frame
like that
wise?
Big. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Short in time frame, because basically cereal boxes work on a 6-week cycle if you go and look.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so they probably try to time it somewhat with how long you have a box of cereal in your... I don't know your proclivity for cereal, honestly, Mike. I mean, some people it's a passion. What about you?
Gosh, the last time I ate some cereal, I mean, Backstreet Boys were probably popular. Their first run.
Oh, okay.
The very first time.
I was going to say that was like 6 months ago.
And it might be even further back, like New Kids. I don't know. I judge all of my phases in life based on popular boy bands.
So you're not one of these adults that makes regular meals out of cereal?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have no expectations. I'm coming into this.
I go into the cereal aisle to buy cereal for my kids. They're aficionados. But
would you say 6 weeks is a good?
They get tired of it after 6 days. So I never really track the patterns of they're not loyalists, so to speak.
So you have a bar, like
yes.
a selection.
But I could see how a 6 week window would be good for that because you're always trying to like, hey, what's the new thing? Capture people's attention as they're walking down the aisle and stuff like that.
You work off of the familiar brand elements.
Yeah.
Yellow box, orange box, whatever it is. But then there's they're giving away a free tote bag.
Yeah.
It's like NPR cereal or something. So that's the shortest time frame. But there's also like those that's a national product.
Yep.
It's usually a national campaign. There's all kinds of dollars behind it. They have ad dollars that they throw at these things. Mm-hmm. TV commercials, everything. End caps, they're buying all the best spots in the store and things like that. So there's a short time frame there. You're working fast. There's a lot of money involved. It's usually pretty successful. Some of those brands have been around forever.
So is the budget really dictates how speedy they can be, right? Because they can put more resources towards it, right? And so there's a lot more stuff going on there, right? Like there's a lot of coordination from everything.
I think the thing to clarify, I guess, is that marketing programs take a while to plan, and they can be successful relevant to how they're measured and what the goals are of that. And part of the calculation you need to make is how much money are you putting into doing this? Because you can make all kinds of cool things, but we know that if nobody sees it, it's, commercially not that viable. Mm-hmm. We've had success with some of the bigger campaigns that we've done that we've spent 6 months planning. We put a 6-month time frame on the campaign. We put a 6-month budget on the campaign and signed a lot of contracts to other advertisers, billboard, whatever it is, all outside vendors to do this stuff. And so there's a very measured, deliberate path forward because there's a lot of things at play. Mm-hmm. And those seem to be the most successful, not just because of the money spent, which I argue you can regulate how much of that money is spent. The planning and the organization of everything is the real key to the success of those campaigns. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the other side, all the way to the other end. It's more of a brand awareness campaign, and it's more of a drip type style where it's keep things moving, keep things current and updated and distributed out to your audience, but you're not spending a lot of money on advertising. You know that the time frame is maybe many, many years. Mm-hmm. So there's a long time frame for those, and they tend to be a regular budget. There's, it's usually not as high of a budget. It's kind of a maintenance type level budget on those kind of.
What to call them heartbeat marketing, right? It just kind of keeps a constant flow of things. Yeah. And the idea with those things is the efforts are kind of cumulative. That your patience will be rewarded by incremental progress over time.
Makes me think too, a relevant piece of that is how big is that audience? Yeah. That kind of an audience is probably, let's argue it's in the dozens of people. Cereal box, millions of people, everybody. Yep. I used to love that. The creative brief I would get from them when they would ask me to do some of these packages were, we want to appeal to men and women from ages 18 to 68. Like, all right, so basically everybody. Yeah.
Is there anybody we want to exclude in that case?
Who can't buy this? Who are we going to prevent from buying this? Yeah. Not a lot of.
It's not a successful way to go into these things. No.
But that's the range of our experiences, right? I mean, it's kind of we have an audience of dozens. Some of those bigger campaigns, it might have been a county or a region or 3 big cities in Northern California or something like that. So maybe you're talking hundreds of thousands of people maybe for those. And those tend to be a little bit, like I said, more planned out, expensive for sure. But I think, one of the analogies that I like to use in thinking of these things is cooking a steak.
Mm-hmm. Speaking my language.
Yeah, I know you're a carnivore.
Yeah.
You love to eat the red meat. What any other meats?
Actually, I like pork a lot. Yeah,
like
good
carnitas.
Oh yeah, I don't discriminate really on most of but if it takes time, takes a long time, it's usually better than something
interesting.
Seared. That's in my
interesting analogy for today's podcast.
Yeah,
takes time. You find there's better results.
Like carnitas, or like a pulled pork type thing, or those things that are like in a smoker for a long time, and you let the smoke like slowly accumulate and have an effect on that piece of meat. When it's done, it's fantastic.
I'm even thinking before that, you're probably soaking it in some sort of organic fluid.
Yeah, depending on the recipe.
Infuses flavor into it, right?
Yep.
So there's that whole pre-planning stage.
Yeah.
You got to make that marinade. You got to go get the meat. You got to put it in the marinade. You got to let that sit. Day. Ideally.
Yep.
It's a long time. Then on the other end of that spectrum, you got, I'm going to go grill a steak. Or broil a steak. That's even scarier.
You must have a really good broiler.
I'm afraid to use my broiler. It's really good and it's dangerous. And there's usually smoke involved. Good. And there's people with like towels doing this.
Those are signs of progress right there.
Well, that's the difference though, is that, when you're broiling a steak, you got to be on your game, man. Every second that thing is in the broiler, you're on it. You're looking, you're observing, you're looking for flame, you're smelling, you're looking for smoke. There's no prep. You pop it right out of the fridge, you jam it right into the broiler. It's quick, it's fast, it's using a ton of resources. It's, you got all kinds of energy going in to cook this thing. The experience is like 20 minutes long.
Yep.
Fraction of the time it takes to roast.
Yeah.
Or marinate and then roast something that you're talking about. There's maybe equal rewards or maybe better rewards depending on your taste. A really good broiled steak tastes pretty darn good. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
It's scary, but it's worth the paycheck sometimes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's called for sometimes, right? Like it fits into the meal planning for your week or month, right? Like that's a weeknight thing. Right?
Right. Yours is a weekend thing.
Weekend. Begins. Not a, weekend.
Yes. Not weekend.
Not the pop star.
No, not the weekend.
Yeah. I'm relating this to like having a team of people like swarming on something to try and get something done really quickly, and knowing that the reward could be really great, but it's time intensive. It could be money expensive too, right? So you have to have the resources of people and budgets sometimes to be able to do that. And it can be a great thing. It could be an amazing,
very successful,
amazing steak, right? Same on the other side of things. Like if you're working on the slow burn of that, that uses a lot less resources, right? You're like, usually when you're doing a slow cook, you're not cooking it at 500 degrees. You're cooking it at 200. Right. So you're using less than half the resources, and you're letting the cumulative effects of time
work its way, work its magic. Exactly.
So that goes back to like those kind of like, would you equate the big pork roast that we're smoking for a long time? That's more of like that heartbeat type marketing type thing that you're talking about.
The broiled steak analogy is the cereal box project. Lots of resources, lots of money, intense. Short experience, bing, bang, boom, it's over with. You cooked it, you ate it, you're out the door in 30 minutes. The other two are variations of that roasting of pork. pork roast. Roasting a pork roast?
Pork shoulder. Let's
roasting a pork
fixate on the shoulder.
Okay,
That's
shoulder.
the best. Yeah. Okay, so we've got these. We've got the effort, the quick burn, the slower burn,
Right.
and both working towards results. The results is yummy food in this case, right? But so we're talking about marketing and everything like that. But like, how does that relate to the boss conundrum, with the shiny object syndrome or whatever? How do you relate that to solving the problem of the boss?
The takeaways are that it's not a crime to change channels or switch horses in the middle of a race, really. It's just, we have to establish up front that what the risks are, what we're doing, clarify and give things time. And if we can't give them time, we got to give them a lot of resources. And those are the two pieces of the equation. You could do it either way. It's a lot maybe less stressful to have a longer time frame, maybe spend less resources all at once, and maybe drip that out over time. I think those tend to be we've seen it. You know, sometimes a marketing or some sort of an inbound or an outreach campaign could take up to 2 years to come up with some results. I mean, you know, in the web world too, I mean, blogs and all those kind of inbound strategies that are organically bringing traffic to your website and an audience to you, that just doesn't happen overnight. And it's really hard to make that happen overnight. You have to have a body of work, and the way that SEO works and a lot of the technology that's out there, you really do have to have kind of some patience for some of that stuff.
Yeah. Let's pretend I'm the boss.
Okay.
I've given you this project to work on, and we talk, we leave this interaction, whether it's Zoom or whatever, the meeting, with a shared understanding of what needs to happen. And then we both go to our separate corners. You get working away and everything, right? And then I'm flipping through newspapers or looking through things, and I see something in Inc. magazine, and I'm like, oh, we really need to try that. And I come barging down your door and say, hey, you know what I told you last week? We need to scrap that. We need to do this thing, right? Like,
that's the scenario. Yes.
How do we take what we've learned about our cooking metaphor and kind of help shape that? Some of it's going to happen, but like, what would you suggest to try and maybe prevent that, or what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, I think the most important thing there is communication, because as I was reading the story and remembering, I have my own version of that story, but so many of those issues start to arise when there's not complete communication about all the most important elements of a marketing campaign. And I would say the risk is higher the smaller the campaign. You need to have a very defined set of questions ready. Have your leadership and stakeholders sign on and commit to timeframes and budgets and goals, and have them check in on a more regular basis so that they understand where you're at with things. But I would also argue that you need to communicate the realities of what it takes to become successful at marketing. And marketing takes a lot of time. People are very leery of marketing. It's,
it can be twisted and manipulated in a lot of bad ways and manipulative ways. Yeah.
And everybody's aware of it because they're marketed to, what did they say? I saw some stat. It was like, we see 30,000 brand impressions a day.
Oh my gosh. Wow. My eyes are getting tired already just thinking about that.
Jeez.
No wonder why I need glasses now.
Here's one now.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think that it's very shocking to think that just because you do something, and I'm coming at it from maybe the stakeholder or the leadership's position, hey, we're going to put something out there. Well, it's going to be successful. I mean, we're putting it out there, right?
Has to be.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that. It's a much more nuanced thing. You can create great things, but if nobody sees it, I think I said this before, it's fairly irrelevant. And in this day and age, sometimes you need to put a little bit of firepower behind some of these things to increase exposure and build into new audiences and really kind of try to expand your outreach as much as you possibly can to get to those other corners of your audience that you may not even be aware of that are out there.
So what I'm hearing is you have a there's a lot of setting expectations before you even set up, right? Like have a clear list of questions that maybe leaves less, like we're in that call, we both have an understanding of things, but if it's all verbal and we don't have a touch point of something we can both look at and agree to, we might have different understandings of what's going on.
Yes.
And so that different understanding could come back a week later. I'm making an assumption on here that like if you're a small team, you're one person trying to do it all and everything, you're not going to have too many of those instances where you've got the quick burn, high resource intensive things going through. So a lot of the things are more like slow burn type things. Let's say you do the right things and you communicate with the boss about like, hey, this is a 6-month campaign where we're going to be doing this and this. This is going to happen every week. This is going to happen every month. This is the activities. This is what we're trying to accomplish. These are our goals that we've set for everything. So we've set that in place. We've done all the right things up front. And I'm the boss again. And I still like, hey, we should look at like texting people offers. Can you get on that? How do you how do you have that conversation?
We'll do a little role play thing here, but I think I would come back and say, that's a great idea. Let's give it a try. Let's build out a campaign plan around that. Put some logistics around it, some planning, some calendaring, see what kind of resources we have. I'm not going to abandon everything else that I've got going on here. We still need to stick to the trail on this goal here. I love the idea. Let's talk about that some more, and we'll try to implement that along the way. But don't let that, and this is internal now, I wouldn't let that overlap or take precedent over the campaign. We need to have an agreement that the campaign we originally talked about 4 months ago, we said we would give it 6 months. Let's really try to give it 6 months. If we have to refine it or change it along the way, that's okay. And that's actually part of being a good marketer, is learning from your data, seeing what's out there, what's getting response, and going towards that. That's always part of any successful marketing plan. But having something come in and just replace it is not fair to anybody, including your audience, I would say, because you're not giving them the chance to kind of learn through this particular channel more about what you're providing. So, it just adds on another campaign. That's what I would argue. That's great. What are your goals? Why do you want to do it? What makes you think that it's going to be successful? Because maybe they do have some data or some insight that they just learned about, their own outreach or their own audience, that they're like, oh, we should try to hit that right away. That's great. Yeah, go for it. But that should, a lot of successful marketing takes time. And if you don't have the time, it takes a lot of money. And most of the solo marketers and the entrepreneurs and people out there that we deal with rarely have that kind of money. And when they do, it's usually a big decision to go forward with those efforts.
Yeah. So I would assume there's something too of just like double checking priorities too, right? Like making sure that you have to evaluate the ask, but also kind of say, okay, well, yeah, I hear what you're saying. We've got this thing already rolling, and we've put some money and some effort behind it. We owe it to this thing to keep it going. Or, like maybe we don't. Maybe results. What would you say about, well, I'm not getting results? We're 3 months in. We don't seem to be getting results.
I'm assuming that you've done a little bit of homework before you jump into a campaign and understand that there is validity to the effort.
Yeah.
You need to be confident that where you're going is you're not just pulling some idea out of the clouds and hoping, you need to kind of make some educated, observations, if anything, like see what competitors are doing, see where your market is, see where your audience is. That's really important. I mean, you need to talk to your audience where they're at, because very few of them, depending on what you're offering, and that's another thing to think about, is the cycle of the buy. How long does it take your customer to buy your product? If you're selling a product or a service that's $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, I argue it takes them a long time to make that buying decision, and they're not doing that on a weekly basis, you know.
Yeah.
But if they're buying a $2 element, you know, something at the store, or, you know, a $4 a month service or something like that, that buying cycle is a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more of a faster paced. You can measure the success of that much easier probably than those slow buying cycle type services, professional services specifically. You know, that's a hard thing to just cut bait on after a few months, because it takes a lot of consideration from your customer to make that sort of an investment in you. So that's something that you need to kind of also consider, is that buying cycle. It is important for there to be very clear expectations on what that hierarchy of importance is, for sure.
Yeah.
And I realize that they can change, especially if your leadership is comfortable with multiple marketing campaigns to multiple different audiences. That seems like that would be very difficult for a solo marketer to manage just in general.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be able to just have one or two campaigns that you're kind of, you know, and I think some smaller companies, that's a pretty good strategy. They've got the keeping the lights on drip awareness campaign that's always going on out there. Maybe it's email, you know, those kind of things, or inbound, a little light inbound touch on that. You can also then run with certain campaigns, maybe around events or conferences or something like that, where you can run a little bit more, you know, quicker time frame, and market to a specific something that's going to happen, product launch, something like that. It's smart to have something like that, at least one of those going maybe at the same time as well. And then you that solo marketer won't be driven too insane by just having to go back and forth between those two. But I think when you start to get into 3, 4, 5, and you have multiple marketing campaigns, and that one person is still trying to do it, you muddle the message, you muddle the goals, that's a difficult thing for one person to manage. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying as one person, that is going to drive you a little crazy.
I mean, I've heard a lot of guidance from a lot of people that if you're struggling, or maybe you're starting from ground zero, like maybe you've been brought in as the first hire, as that first marketing team of one, that like it's probably best to figure out, like, do one thing, do it consistently, do it for a year, don't pollute it at all, like, and then see what happens. And then after that year, check in and see what worked and what didn't work. And because it might take that long to see some results, right? And so, I mean, you have to feel really confident, come into a brand new situation and be able to, you know, put it all out there, like, hey, this might take a year. I'm going to keep working towards it. We're going to keep doing the same thing in the same channel all the time, and we're going to see what we get out of it. So I see that as being like a little bit of a challenge, but that's the reality that's kind of out there too, that you have to kind of balance against, you know, there's that long-term thinking of things, right? But there's also the ebbs and flows of other things that might come about too. And so to manage all those. And I think it's a juggling act, right?
And that brings up the idea of risk. You need to set the foundation, right? That's what you're talking about, is just set the foundation first. Then you can start to add in a risk element, whether it's those pointed campaigns or expensive campaigns. You know, back to the steak broiling, there's a lot of risk when you're broiling a steak. I mean, you could burn that thing in seconds. You know, you got to keep your eyes on it, keep it going. But that's where measuring starting off with probably low risk of campaigns is the baseline, and then move into a slightly riskier things along the way. If you're going to add things on, maybe try some different things along that way. I think too, other people are like, well, we've spent this much money, why isn't it viral? Or we've done this thing that's really, you know, look at this PowerPoint presentation we did for this conference, why isn't that viral? And I think that people need to there's so much out there to compete with. That I've heard that from not to me specifically, but I know that we've worked with marketers in the past who've been pressured to make things go viral. And that's fine if you want to try to make things go viral, but there's a lot of risk with that most business leaders do not want to take. And depending on what product or service you're selling, there's no room for that kind of going viral dynamic on any sort of marketing campaign.
Yeah. We came into this and we're talking about one very specific boss. And I think we have this idea of like an entrepreneur who is very motivated, very like go all the time, very
reads a lot of books,
reads a
listens
lot
to
of books.
podcasts.
Yeah. Is susceptible to a lot of like crazy inputs, right?
Me being one.
So, but and everything we've talked about fits that kind of narrative. But if you've got, let's say you've got the other side of it, you've got someone who is maybe, let's say more frugal. Let's say they're more like set in their ways. This has worked for a long time. Like why upset the apple cart? Like if you're in that situation and you're just dying to try something new, like how would you go about broaching that subject, right? Like how would you try and get the decision makers to change their mind a little bit about the path and maybe consider other options?
I'm sure you have some ideas around that too, because I know I come at it from a brand perspective that I'm always looking, and I would think that person is risk averse, is worried about tarnishing their brand or their reputation and something like that. In that case, my suggestion would be to remove that as much as possible by maybe building a slightly different sub-brand or something that fits underneath that is a little bit more free form. I've seen, you can think of like insurance companies where they'll use little animals or silly characters, but you barely remember who they were brand name wise, because maybe they've separated it a little bit or something like that. That could be one way of kind of stretching your legs as a creative marketer if you want to get out there and really try to make an impact and kind of prove if that makes sense. And maybe you can speak a little bit to the data side of it, because I think that's another part of it that you probably want to explore and use as ammunition to talk to your leadership and make a case for something.
I think a lot of it could be like, it's almost like going into pitch. It's like a Shark Tank pitch type thing, right? Yep. Like you're like, hey, here's what I'm seeing. Like, I think there's an opportunity here. Here's some data to back it up. Like, here's what's been working. Here's some things that we've got going on. Here's my idea. Here's how it could play out. And then and do what you can in that pitch to reduce the appearance of risk the whole time. So like if you can, and I think if you could maybe attach it to like, hey, this isn't going to cost a lot of money. It's not very hard to do, but it is a little different. You might be more receptive. You're not going to be able to go in there and say, use the Shark Tank analogy again. You've got this little widget and you're asking for a, $10 million investment for 1% in the company. That rarely happens. That doesn't happen, right?
No.
Like, so you don't want to amp up the risk, all this stuff to where, you're Mr. Wonderful is like, you're crazy, get out of here. Right. But if you can do something that makes it a little bit easier, especially if you haven't done it before, like do something really easy. And I think in that scenario, if you got somebody like that, if you can say, hey, like I'm coming at it from like, matching it up to things I've done before with like tools and stuff like that. Like, hey, here's this new tool that we've got here that I'd love to try out. Now, I know it's another tool, but I think what we could do is to make room for that. We have these other things, like do the work beforehand and say, these are all the other things that we've got going on. We're barely using it, or in a marketing case, we're doing all these things and they don't really seem to be working. So we could save some budget here to apply for this budget. It's not going to take much more time, but we can do it on a trial basis. So we're not upsetting the tracks that this train is on. We're working on something on the side. Let's see how it works. If it doesn't work, no big deal.
I see like examples that come to my mind for something like that are very much centered around social media, right? Short form video kind of things like, and I know everybody, TikTok, take it for what it is. I mean, that's a powerful marketing tool that I think has driven a lot of business or awareness for people. And that's one of those low bar things that people have kind of jumped into and let's just try it. I know that we've had clients that are gigantic that don't have any presence on TikTok or some of these other platforms that provide that kind of, I don't want to call it SEO, but awareness that all of a sudden there's discoverability around that that is risky. But you don't know, because of the format of that short form video, let's say 20, 30 seconds, you can expose yourself to millions of people if it's something that's somewhat interesting, and you don't have to take huge risks. I know that, the Sacramento History Museum, their print shop is just past 1 billion views or some crazy number because they put together TikTok videos, and it's an old gentleman that's just working on an old printing press, and they're completely viral. I mean, it's insane, and no risk there, but just a different platform and different format. And
I feel like it's very risky to try and expose yourself to billions of people.
That's a good, maybe I need to rephrase that.
I've been worried about that. There's databases of people that do with that.
That's right. One time the FBI had to make a phone call. I remember.
But
it was rough.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So like just in that case, it's a really simple, like you're almost taking a flyer on it, right? Like, hey, let me turn my phone on something I'm doing all the time and put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, that's, there's a time and a place for it. I'm not saying that's appropriate, but there's a low risk on the financial and time frame side of it, I guess you could say, scheduling side.
I mean, from my perspective, every time social media comes up, I think like takes forever, and we're not going to like to do it right. You know what I mean? Like,
what does forever mean? And what's your interpretation of forever? Because
forever?
Yeah. Like I can kind of agree.
When's this podcast over? No,
thank you.
I think maybe it doesn't take forever. I've always you have to love it. I just don't. 2, you have to be like all the guidances and all the hacks of like how to do this and this. It's, you got to post 3-4 times a day. You got to interact with people.
Oh, yeah,
okay. And if I'm a boss and you're telling me that, hey, here's this TikTok thing over here, I'd be pretty skeptical. Like, okay, prove to me it's not going to take too much time and that this is worth the effort.
Yeah. I could see that.
I don't have an answer to that. That's the questions I ask anytime somebody talks about social media. I'm like, okay. So I know it looks fun. It really does look fun, but is it something that's going to get us is it going to reach our long-term goals, And I think that's not our forever goals, our long-term goals.
Well, and is it again, back to the price point, are we selling a $40,000 service? I don't know that I'm going to do that on a TikTok.
Yeah.
I mean, TikTok would be like, get to know Mike, get to know Eric,
Yeah.
Who would, not a lot there.
Nobody wants to do that.
Exactly. Like, anyway.
Reach out if you get to this point in the video and let us know that you are watching.
So that's what's nice about YouTube is you can see immediately the drop off. Like, wait, what did I say there? And then there goes your audience.
So I feel like we covered a lot of ground, right? Like and as we do, meandered a little bit, but like, what are your big takeaways from this? If you had to like boil this down, the TL,
you mean broil,
as they say.
You mean broil?
If we have to broil this down,
yes. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry about that, but I think if you're going to broil this down, what you want to do is really just kind of start off with a commitment that's, establish what those goals are and make sure that those are measurable goals that are very smart. We talk about SMART goals all the time. Get those down, get people committed to it and understanding that, yes, they might change over time. That's okay. We can tweak and adjust, and we're supposed to based on data and things that we learn. So that's important to keep that. But the overall goal, audience, the structure, in a sense, should stay intact for whatever that agreed upon time frame was established right when things began, so that we're not ripping the carpet out from underneath people. And honestly, unless you've got lots and lots of resources and time and money to throw at things intensely, like you're broiling that steak and taking huge risks around that, give it time, be patient. And if you're going to be patient, make sure that there's consistent check-ins with data points with leadership and stakeholders so that they understand where things are at along the way and you're making changes and tweaks along the way too, so that it is intelligent and that it is intentional and that you're not wasting those resources.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, be flexible. If there are new ideas that come to light, add those on as separate marketing campaigns with slightly different mechanics, goals, whatever you want to, whatever makes that different. Just keep that established as something that doesn't influence the commitments to that initial marketing plan.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things that I would want people to kind of understand. So much of it's about communication.
So much, right? It's all about.
I wish it wasn't, but
it would be so easy if everyone thought like I do.
Exactly.
How perfect would everything be?
It would be so much easier. Gosh.
Not even. There's nothing even close to an army of my clones.
No, we're outliers, Mike. That's our unfortunate lot in life.
You put together something that you think could help in a lot of things we've talked about. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. If you go to marketingteamofone.net, our website, you can download a free PDF that is a quick kind of cheat sheet that you can grab really quickly, circle things, check things off, but it should help you get through planning a project and establishing kind of those milestones and those kind of important details that you need to capture immediately when that project request comes in. It's for those kind of quick little brainstorming sessions with your leadership. So
not everything needs to be directly right into the computer, right? Get your hands dirty a little bit with some graphite and paper.
Old school. I dig that. Yeah, for sure. I go fountain pen, but I'm more modern than you. You're more caveman.
I like to balance things out. I just want to thank you because you've enlightened me as to, I think the metaphor is very apt. It fits really good for a lot of different ways. And you've given me my shopping list for today for the weekend. Steak tonight, pork shoulder on Sunday. I'm set. This is going to be great.
And cardiologist appointment on Monday. Just to kind of make sure everything's all cleared out and you're good to go.
I eat rabbit food in between those things. Just celery, kale, you got to balance it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would make me angry most of the time. If I had to eat that regularly, that would just not be. But you know what? It's good to do that. Some days I don't eat anything really.
So I'm going to burn up a bunch of resources tonight.
Nice.
And I'm going to conserve them for the rest of the weekend.
I like that. That's a really good.
It's a good way to approach life, huh?
It really is. You're living the best life over there, Mike. We're admiring from a distance. It's beautiful.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It was fun.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information and other episodes, subscribe to the Marketing Team of One podcast on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify podcast networks. You can also chat with us on the r/Marketing Team of One subreddit or visit marketingteamofone.net to learn more.